think we are really very lucky to get people like the archivists, because they have a much more dynamic view of archiving than I certainly ever had. You know, yeah, having come up in a somewhat more ancient regime about the purpose of archives. So thanks very much for redefining this thing, struggling with what the hell archiving really means, what its social purpose is, how it is linked to struggles in society, for defining what exactly the problematic is that we struggle with, to use it for the purpose of mobilization, etc., etc. Thank you very much for doing that. John said two things. Said one thing to me yesterday or day before. He said, Enver, when you get there, tell them to start developing podcasts out of this. Now, yeah, it's fantastic. I didn't think about it, but John, as always, reminds us of things which we don't think about because of his much deeper insights. And I began saying, yeah, John, that's right, that's right. And then I thought about Marcus's work and Asher's work, and Coney's work. Where is Coney? Coney? Hello, Coney. Well, there's the first podcasts. They are there. Please organize them to do a podcast on what the hell they've been, and I tell you, thousands of people will love it. We'll enjoy it. We'll bring Upbeat alive. We'll bring Marcus, our project, LACOM alive. We'll bring Yuichi Chan and Neville's party alive. Very, very important. And while I was sitting there listening to the language discussion, yeah, we have a problem. The materials are all in English, the materials that we're archiving. But that's not a barrier. It shouldn't be, cannot be, because especially if you start doing podcasts in which you trans-language, multi-language. Look, I'm still trying to understand this big debate. Brian, please organize a session for us to understand this thing more fully, okay? You, Tim, where are you? Just for us, do that. Teach us, show us the limitations of our work. There is some writing. There's an article which, by the way, Marcus criticizes our LACOM project by, I forget his name. It's a critique of the way in which we did like freedom from below, the images we use and so on. It's a constructive critique. It's a very friendly critique, useful one. So thank you very much for allowing us to say a few things about it. Thank you.
Viva Podcast, Viva. Thank you. Thanks, Enver. You've reminded me that a very important part of the project is that it is a collaboration between a number of institutions. So it's not only the veterans of SACID, but in fact involves folk from UWC, Maibuye, the archives, the history department, colleagues from UJ, so Salim's center, and of course NMU. And that's an important point, because we live in a neoliberal world where universities are supposed to compete against one another for rankings and other things like that. And what the SACID project manifests is work against that kind of competition, and to understand that we are much better when we cooperate. And I think Neville would be proud of those of us working actively against the neoliberal competition that we're all supposed to adhere to, and in fact work together in order to bring this archive alive. And there's a lot more work to be done, not only technologically, but on language issues, political issues. So thanks very much. I just wanted to acknowledge those colleagues and comrades from the other institutions who are playing a central role in the development of the archive. One should just say, and the two students will explain this more, that the archive doesn't belong to one institution. So last year we had a bit of a debate because there was a profound misunderstanding. At least one person thought that I personally wanted to colonize the Sackett archive. It's a collective project, and it doesn't belong to any one person or any one institution. We are going to move on to a very short video by David Adler, and after that, Tammy Lee and Lawrence will move on. So do I have to press a button? I don't have to press a button, so I can just move away and it will work, okay? Yeah.
Was interesting and persuasive. What struck me as I pondered was that the Sackett experience might continue to make a significant impact in alleviating the crisis in education currently affecting South African education. The archive could highlight Sackett's accumulated experience, its array of innovative, high-quality and mind-opening materials. These innovations were delivered in a range of modes to a wide spectrum of educational and societal needs. The range covers formal and informal spheres and targets youth and adults. An active Sackett archive could work immediately alongside the current system. Its operation would need to be amicable and collaborative, not critical and judgmental. I confess that this thought was the product of a short conversation with John Samuel. We both felt that there was still a chance to assist the state to see and practice alternative support systems that might bring hope to those who believe that the education system is not answering the needs of either individuals or those of the developmental state. Many of Sackett's practices and products are still relevant. These include extending and improving distance education through Sackett's work with UNISA, the University of London, and sometimes with the Open University, which will improve distance learning in a higher education system. Then, the production of acclaimed learning materials for secondary schools developed for Turret Correspondence College. Then the setting up of the Study Centres project, which began a system to assist high school learners with support in decentralized centres outside of schools. I mentioned the National Distribution Support Program enabled by the People's College, a weekly newspaper supplement that made a vivid contribution to alternate learning until it was banned in 1977. And finally, the Bophuthatswana Teacher Upgrading Project, an important learning experience in working alongside the official system to train teachers, extramurally and over a large geographical area. I must mention the materials developed by SECA for an alternative for higher education access that continues to be useful and valued. I would also like to mention cognitive developments allied to the experience of the Trust. Among others, this includes the extension improvement of distance education led by Jenny, Glennie and Sadie. Also the innovative developmental examinations for adults and basic education led by Edward French and Meg Pard at the IEB. And finally, the development of extramural training of school principals by Pat Sullivan of the Management of Schools Training Program, which worked alongside the formal school system. I know it is not the intention of the archive project to remain in a vault at a university. SACED in its different phases always had a vision of opening the mind, supporting confidence and self-esteem, and making quality education available to all. Isn't this the occasion to actively commit ourselves to building on this ideal? Spreading the act of knowledge and experience involved in giving life to SACED's ideals and innovations needs to be at the heart of the work of the SACED, of the archive. Thank you.
Nsikani Ndyangu. Hey. Welcome, and thank you to everyone who organized this occasion. Just to start working together with Louise and Tammy Lee, the project has been fun and quite amusing. One of us, out of the three of us, really struggles with technology. One of us incorrectly claimed that when meeting Ashley Duploy, he came wearing a petticoat instead of a waistcoat. And finally, one of us kept confusing an archival repository with an archival suppository. Anyway, the website, which is what we are presenting, is one of the products of what we've been working on over the past year. It is a work in progress, but it's also quite, it's substantially developed as well. This website is a vehicle to make the rich resources that SACED produced accessible. They're all downloadable and accessible, and integrate their value into the present. It also brings to the fore SACED ideas and history and is a valuable resource for that as well.
Hi, everyone. So the first page that you see is what you'd call the home page. Many websites have them. And essentially, this provides a brief overview of what the website has to offer. When you scroll right down, you sort of see this timeline of SACED's turning points and projects, and it begins with its inception in 1959 and sort of ends with the SECA in the 90s, but then also jumps to the SACED archiving project today. Yeah, and below that, you can sort of see our contact details and our partners. So yeah, it gives you sort of insight into what the rest of the website is about. You see sort of the voices of SACED peeking out over there. Yeah. Yeah, that's about it.
Sorry, just to move to the About page. So this is just the kind of story of what the SACED archiving project is about and its purpose. It's it was written by John Samuel and Enver Motala, and it describes the project. It's a kind of description of the project and the purposes of SACED. It's just for people who are not familiar with that history and don't know about it. If we go to Voices of SACED, so over the course of the project, we've done about 40 interviews and collected about 50 personal reflections. The personal reflections are kind of people's reflections on their time in SACED, the significance of their work, and so on. Two that are particularly interesting to me. One was Bill Nasson writing, who wrote recently about it. It's just the internet, not. So just as a summary, he says, I turned to SACED completely by chance, prompted by a small notice in the Cape Times listing alternative correspondence study and bursary opportunities through the University of London. It offered a kind of migration from South Africa, or at least an exodus of your mind. Somebody else who I thought to read about is Paul Titchman, who is in the audience, who is here today. Writing about LACOM, he says, the idea was to produce a history of the labor struggle in a way that would make it accessible to ordinary workers. And that was through the production of Freedom from Below. This is that we also have a lot of images of SACID people, which we'll show later, but they.
It's a great picture.
The great.
Yeah, we do. And from the oral histories that we've collected over the last year or so, I've chosen to speak. A lot of my interviewees are here, so that's really cool. I've chosen to highlight Nathim Hendricks, who worked on the Upbeat project in distribution, and he also later joined ASECA with Louise. And I love this quote. He says that, well, you see, SACID is a national treasure, if I can put it like that. It is a national treasure. It is part of the heritage of South Africa and South African education. And after today, I think we can all see how accurate that is. We're now going to move on to a project, the project section, rather. So under the section, you can find all of SACID's projects. ASECA, Airway, LACOM, and Upbeat, of course. We decided to highlight ASECA because it was sort of, the 90s. Louise was the project director. And yeah, you can see sort of the materials. They're downloadable. And we've been actually reaching out to people. Louise will talk about this later, but we've been reaching out to people to utilize them today. And that's pretty great that they're still relevant. And then if you scroll up a bit, there's it by Louise that you wrote us. And I think that is wonderful. It's sort of the personal and how the project came together. Thanks. Lawrence will now do a bit on the publications.
Yes, the publications are really, it's a pleasure to present them. These have been digitized at WITS, full-length books, which were all SACID books, so there's no copyright issue and it's no problem for people to download them. I'm sure many of you will be familiar with many of these titles. Freedom from Below, which was which Enver just spoke about. Also the comics which were used, giving Saul Plaatje's story, Saul Plaatje of Moody. So there's a range. We have about 9 publications up, but the website is also, which we'll show in a minute, is linked to the WITS archive. Again, the WITS archive is a digital platform, and it under links we have a link to it. But the archive houses many more materials. The website has a certain limit to what it can house, and the archive houses about 40 copies of Upbeats instead of just 5, and 20 books instead of just the 8 we have here. I think, yeah, there's also images in the gallery, which kind of show the history of SACID, but I think it's also nice for people who were learners in SACID or people who worked with SACID. Sorry, terminology might be wrong there, but just to see and browse through. Yeah. We have a lot of different pictures. I don't know if you recognize your younger selves, some of you. Yeah, you can go. Yeah. This archives page is what I was talking about. It gives the multiple different archives where you can access the material. Some of it, not all the material is digitized, especially the kind of like dreary annual reports, which Ashley kind of compiled. But no, I'm joking. But those are in the physical archive. The digitized stuff is kind of the publications and so on. Yeah, speak about my boy, I think. Yeah. Sorry, we just want to. Once we just.
So as you saw, the archival collections are housed at about 3 separate or different institutions, and I was going to read a small something. It says that Sackett's collections exist in 3 institutions. The Sackett collection are housed at UWC Wits and the University of Cape Town, which is where we are. These collections contain distinctive materials for several reasons relating to the geography of Sackett offices, the proximity of the employees, and of course natural disasters like the fire at Jaeger Reading Hall. That particular fire destroyed all Sackett's historical papers, and what remained though was the AVS, and we have one of those videos. We've been able to obtain it. They will also be available on the website eventually. And yeah, before I show you the video, I just wanted to tell you a bit about the Maibuye collection, which is what I focused on. It contains 726 boxes. Some boxes contain hundreds of documents. Very fun. And so when it came to like choose something to show you today, it was very difficult. I chose 3 distinctive things, but all pertaining to Neville. The first is a newsletter called Point of View, which was a Sackett newsletter. It's on that end. And you can see Neville on the cover there. It's from 1983. Very interesting. The one in the middle is one of my favorites. It is Sackett Registration Day 1981. That's what the file's called. And it's all these wonderful pictures of students, sitting around, and just the beginning of the year. It was in January. And the last item is the most interesting, is a sort of a chronicle of Neville's first year at Sackett in 1979. And according to Lindy Wilson, this is in his handwriting. So it's a very cool document. I'll show you the UCT video just now.
The final thing we are going to present is just the Wits Historical Papers collection, which is what I talked about. We have collections from all kinds, all Sackett, different Sackett members, including Louise Vale, Harriet Perlman, Ashley Duploy's collection is by far the largest one. I've spent a long time sorting through copious amounts of documents, but the collection is particularly useful, in fact, in terms of Sackett's transition in the 1990s and its change, partly because people left Sackett to go into government, funding went towards government, and just in the way it negotiated that change and ended up. There hasn't been that much written about that, but as a resource to tell the history of Sackett, I think the collection is useful. I just want to also show the Wits Historical Papers website, which is where we've housed further collections of Sackett material. This is the Wits Historical Papers website. Sorry, I won't speak with the mic. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Well, I'm getting different opinions, eh? Not. So we have some of the individual collections. I don't know. Okay, sorry about this. Sure, thank you. Okay, no problem. We have some of these individual collections, which I mentioned, of Louise Vale, Harriet Perlman, and Ashley Duploy. We also have articles and publications. Many of these are replicated on the website, but the extent is much greater in the archive, and they are freely accessible and available. Many of you will recognize there are some videos submitted by Lindy Wilson, and also many copies of Upbeat magazine, which are digitized and online. So the extent of the materials which we've digitized is actually still small. Still, there's a lot more to do, but the website is a start towards sharing some of these valuable resources. Okay, thank you. Do you want to speak to? Yeah.
Thanks very much. There's one very, very important document which I'd like to refer to. I don't know if it's already been archived. Salim, do you remember the document? Neville wrote a 33-week successive week.
People's College.
In People's on African history. This was in the 1980s, and we brought it out recently. Salim, when was this? Just recently, eh? About 3 years ago. So, and remember, it was written in the 80s, and it still has enormous relevance today. And in all these discussions about decolonizing history and so on, so forth, I don't know when it's going to be put on the website, but it's very important. So when it gets on, please get it and circulate it to all the schools you know, all the universities, departments that are teaching, trying to decolonize history in ways they think about it. But Neville wrote those 33 pieces on a weekly basis, which are very, very important, I think. Thanks. Hey?
There's no need for a podcast. Every single one of those People's College editions is on the website and in the archives. So you just have to go to the People's College, you press, and you can just download the whole lot. It's all free. There's no copyright. And this has been a very big part of the project. So the purpose of, and I'm not going to go through too much, but the purpose of the project is to take the past, to influence the present, to create a new future. And a lot to do with the fact that of the developed education in the country at the moment, and in terms of materials and methodology, it's operating, the fact that it's only 2% of the country budget, education budget, and all those issues. So considering what SAC had produced over a long period of time by very thoughtful people working very hard, very little, under dangerous circumstances, but the brilliant materials. And it was felt that we really need to get these materials out and back into the sector. That was our purpose. So the best way is to digitize. And because SACED doesn't exist, so I don't know whoever thinks that we're going to go forward and take this forward and that forward, but it doesn't exist anymore. Okay, so there's no copyright and everybody can use whatever they like. The people who exist in the SACED archiving project is Lawrence, Tammy, and me. That's it. Okay. So what we have done, as you've seen, and they've been showing you, is locating the materials, finding the materials, digitizing materials, uploading the materials, and creating the website. So that's a quick background of what we've been doing, and we've done it in the last year. We were lucky to get $50,000 from Ford Foundation for last year, and that is how we've been able to do this. So this is the beginning. The website is the beginning. So what I'd like to do is, first of all, I'm talking about the way forward, is to get the elephant out of the room and out of the way. We have no funding for next year. Bottom line, there are three scenarios. We get nothing, we get something, or we get all of what we've asked for. we'll have to make a plan when we find out what's going on. But that's the situation at the moment. Sorry, I'm just looking at all friendly faces all over the place. And people that have interviewed. Corona's on there, all sorts of people there. Okay, so that's the elephant in the room. No money, but somehow we'll make some kind of plan. And there's a lot that's happened here. The big thing, I suppose, in the future is to ensure that everything gets uploaded and uploaded onto the various archives so that it can continue to just be downloaded. And what people can do is print, critique, use, adapt, whatever you like with the materials. There's no control over them at all. So what we will do, somehow we have to continue with the collection of materials and documents. We will continue with interviews. We might have 40 interviews, but there are many missing voices. Missing voices, but missing voices. We've managing to track down people like Thandi Ngabule, Evie Nyongo. People will recognize names here. Jean Pease, I found her in America. Jonathan Godden. Then we've got people we can't get to because there are gatekeepers around them, like Libby's Jonas, Sharon, Adam Habib. It's very difficult to get through to those people. And then sometimes you get a date with someone, they forget. Vumile Danile, yeah, we're after you. He was supposed to be part of the Eastern Cape interview, and he forgot. So you've got group interviews too. Hey? There's group interviews around publications, group interviews around the Eastern Cape, and things like that. And then, where's Selby? Okay, we're after you too, Selby, about the resource centres in Uppington. So there's a lot of that still to be done. And it's a big job, actually, because you do the interview, then you transcribe it, then you copy edit, because it will put Sackhead down as Sucket, and Lakecombe down as Lake Farm, or all sorts of really weird interpretations. So you really have to copy edit those transcriptions. Then we have to send them back to the person who was interviewed. They've got to give you a consent form, and then you digitize it and put it up. Okay, so we're doing quite a lot of those still, although how many of you got up now? Well, so 20 are up there already. Okay, so there's a lot to look at and read up there already. A whole group of people. Anyway, you'll see it all on there. You just have to press, what's it called? Personal reflections, and you'll just scroll down. There's 3 or 4 pages, and you can pick and choose to whom you want to read. Okay, so then that's it. So we want to deepen the website through the digitization and moving and connecting continually with the archives. And then we want to go further into the interaction. I mean, it's been fantastic, and I think the emphasis on the fact that we are working with 3 different archives and 3 different universities. We're not going to consolidate them. What is there, and the access is actually through the digitization. But you can go to any of those 3 universities, and I think I'm even finding a bit at UNISA, not much. But yeah, so what we would like to do in the future, if we ever get any money, but anyway, we'll see how we go, is to continue interacting with the materials and the present. We've got some good, fantastic examples, and Coney is one of them. Coney and Upbeat, a wonderful model of using Upbeat and working with Upbeat in the present day education system. And then Asha and Marcus, you'll see them at the launch later, but we've managed to also support Asher in producing a book around Marcus's Lacombe thesis. So you've got that whole happening, and that's also an interaction with the present. The other thing that has happened is that I've managed to get some connections with the DHET around materials and curriculum, and there's been very positive noises. I'm not going to go any further than that, but there are positive noises around the ASECA material, and that would be great. Then John and Tony have a dream, John, Samuel and Tony Marks have a dream that the materials could be used in public libraries and that they could create spaces in which people could read and write and create their own publications, like Upbeat. That's how Upbeat was developed. And People's College, other ways of doing it. But that will require further funding. At least the materials are available and people could use them. And then you've got an existing infrastructure. So that is their dream. And then we would like to also have further seminars, workshops with activists and NGOs who would debate, fight with, destroy, create further some of the SACED thinking and the SACED materials themselves. And any requests and suggestions from you, we would really like to work with that. But I also think that SACED, it's only a small contribution to the adult learning sector in South Africa. There are many others. And I think what would be really great next year is if there was a brainstorm workshop. Everybody doesn't know. No one else goes there with the answers because we don't know what they are. And everybody just brainstorms a way forward based on experiences of the past, the present, and what we want in the future. So those are the 6 suggestions that we have for the way forward. Lastly, I'd like to make a few acknowledgements. Yes, I acknowledge and thank very much the institutions, as we've mentioned them already, but particularly the Wits History Workshop for actually taking us under their wing, and the advisory board. The names are actually on the website. But also to Lindia and Natalie Trout for continuing to work on the website, despite 9 months of bureaucratic bungling, re their payment from the Inhuman Resources Department of the institution, which was responsible. I won't name it, but really there are inhuman resources. Then I'd like to thank Azizo from the digitization unit at WITS. He's been amazing. Without him, we would have not been able to show you obviously anything, but he's doing it's a really quality job, it's a fast job, and he's charging us very little. It feels like he's also a funder. So thank you to Azizo. Then thank you to Gabby Mohale, who's the head of the WITS archive. She's given us the space in which to work. We're all sitting there in her building. And she kind of looks after us. And Butamelo for uploading. So you have to upload to a hard drive, which you can then upload to the website. But then you've still got to upload onto the archive system, which is a whole other story. And I think, well, it needs people, mainly. And lastly, I'd like to thank my pillars of strength. Without them, this wouldn't happen. One is Tammy Lee LeKay, who's at UWC, just handed in her master's project, her master's thesis, sorry. I'm not an academic. And to Lawrence Stewart, who's at WITS and who's working on his PhD thesis. It's on environmental history in Soweto. An interesting topic. I didn't know one could do things like that. So without them, I mean, they have been absolutely fantastic. Yeah. And as I say, are the pillars of the project. It would never have got anywhere near where it is without them. Thank you.
And thanks to Louise as well. Thanks very much. We have about 5 minutes, so if there are any questions or comments, then let's take a few hands. So I'm going to give you a number because I don't know all of you. So 1, 2, 3, 4, where's 1? 5. Yeah, 1 there. Okay, let's go for that. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you for the chance to speak. I'm Tirivashe, and I just wanted to say thank you to the previous panelists and also the panelists now for the work that you're doing. I just want to quickly say, I don't come as a doctor, I come as an individual. That's why I said I'm Tirivashe. I don't come here with any title. I don't have a job, I'm unemployed. I don't drive, so it means that I can speak freely. And I wanted to first begin by saying thank you. Yeah, I'm not on anybody's payroll, so I can't be fired. I want to begin by saying thank you, because while I do have many critiques, I'm really glad for the work that's being done, both by the people that are working on translanguaging, multilingual languaging, and bilingual education, and also by you as archivists and working on the project. I'm a student of history, and actually what I wanted to say is that I think there's a necessity of history, and there's a necessity for us to go back into the past. Why do I say that? For me, myself, I feel that there's a dishonesty that's here, not here in terms of the conference itself, but in terms of what we're doing in the university. Why do I say that? Until the people can be honest and we can start addressing all the elephants in the room, we'll struggle to move forward. We were talking earlier about racism and dislocation and hegemonic forces, and I just want to quickly say we are anti-African in the systems that we have here. I want to say that because there is no amount of PhDing, mastering that we can do that's going to liberate everybody here. And if we would like a better society, a more educated society, a more equitable society, we have to be honest about these things. Until some of the comrades can stop having house helps that look like me, until your gardeners no longer look like me, there's not much that we are doing here. So all I want to say is I love what the work that's being done, and we must work regardless of the problems that we have. But I do want to say we have to address some of these other fundamental issues. There are 16 million economically what they would either say unviable, unproductive. I don't know, because again, I said I'm unemployed, so I'm one of them, people in this country. And I'm just trying to say that to say, yes, we can educate people in their home languages, but first we must deal with the anti-Africanness. Until African people for themselves can self-actualize and self-realize, we will continue to fight about whether we're going to teach in English or Afrikaans. In other nations, people are not judged by their ability to speak in foreign languages. For example, if you are raised in China, you can be educated up to university level in Mandarin or Cantonese. If you are raised in Ethiopia, you are able to speak your home language up until university level, up until PhD. I just say this to say we can reimagine the way that we do things. We have inherited a particular education system. We've inherited a particular, system that we have. Of course, there are global hegemonic forces, but we have some agency in that. We can reject the status quo. The problem is we are training everybody to work. We are training everybody for particular roles in this society. And my problem is there's not enough jobs for all of us. There's not enough resources, they say, for all of us. So what can we do instead? How can our education that's in the community help the people? University is not going to help everybody. So what can we do in the communities? What can we do at the grassroots? I feel that until we start to treat everybody as if they are a doctor in the room, there is no progress we're going to make. Until we start to treat our cleaners differently, our staff differently, there is no progress that we're making. It doesn't matter how many people that look like me get into power. The point that I'm trying to say is if we begin at the bottom, perhaps we could shake change at the top level. I just wanted to say this because it was burning me earlier on, but I just really wanted to say the work that's being done is brilliant, and the comrades must not be disheartened, and they must continue to do so. But let's also start to have some honest conversations. It is 2024. In Gaza, people are being wiped out based on their ethnicity, based on where they come from and their identity. Until we start to name the elephants in the room, until we start to tackle them one by one, there is no progress being made. While we sit here drinking coffee, other universities are coming down. So that's just to say that there are very real existential threats at the moment that we must tackle head on, and then all of these things will have even more impact than they already have. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Host. Greetings, everybody. My name is William Leith. I'm very excited to be here, and this kind of work is just wonderful. I have a question, but just a comment. I am a product of SACIT, and somebody said earlier that SACIT is a national treasure, and of course it is, and it is reflected in the kind of work that you all do. I was with people like Bill Nasson and Farida Khan and Zubaydah Desai and so on. So that's pre-Neville's period. SACIT was established in 1959. We were there in the early 70s. Lindy Wilson, Dr. Edgar Maurice. And the whole question of SACIT and all the wonderful work that we know of, but SACIT is a living organism. It changes over time as society shifts. And SACIT was established in 1959, which was the period of colonial decolonization. So it's a particular period. And with all these kind of projects and organizations that come into being, and we have many of them throughout the world now, there is what one might just call a comprador element in all of these wonderful organizations. And so my question is, could somebody talk? We'll read all the stuff for ourselves, but just shortly. There must have been some kind of ideological shift from 59 through the Neville period up until now. So if somebody could just very briefly talk about if and when and what were those kind of ideological shifts. Thank you.
Thanks. Behind you.
Thank you. Just for the archivist of the project, I remember everybody here of a certain generation as well remember the New Nation newspaper, right? Edited by Zwelakhe Sisulu. Now, I do remember that sometime in the 1980s, SACIT staff, I think it was LACOM staff, contributed a series of articles to the New Nation. It was like a regular series which we used in consciousness raising, because we were teachers at the time and we used those articles to raise consciousness amongst our students and youth organizations. So I don't know if it's more a point of information for those busy with the archive to try and trace those articles. It was published in the New Nation newspaper, was published on a weekly basis. I mean, it was banned in 1988, I think, sometime around there with a state of emergency. But that should also, be indexed. I don't know if the New Nation newspaper has ever been archived or anything, but there was a substantive contribution by SACIT staff on, I think it was focusing on labor issues. But I mean, it had a wide, I can't remember the exact focus, but that's what I do remember. Louise will maybe know. Thanks. That's what I wanted to say.
Please get handed over.
Good morning. My name is Amanda. By the way, thank you very much to all the presenters and certainly thank you, Salim, for this wonderful conference again. time has flown since last year's conference, and so much has happened, particularly if we look at Gaza and the absolutely inhumane activities from the Western world. But thank you that education, for the leaders in education, for the courage to take the courage in bilingual education, regardless of what the Western world is trying to do. Thank you for Sachet and the wonderful archives and meaningful contribution. And if we look at the Pan-African conference, that is anti-colonial, anti-neoliberal, neoliberalization for African growth and charter. Thank you.
I just have a comment. If it wasn't for Neville and Sackhead, I would either have been a subservient housewife or a pole dancer. So, so thanks to this, the Cornell tribe, Lindy Wilson. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks. We were doing alliteration earlier, so it's podcasts and pole dancing. So we're looking, and no peeing. So we're getting there. So I'm just checking. We have to kind of end now. I'm going to ask Louise and our archivist to make any comments, and then we'll end. Yeah.
I mean, I think the very important part of the comment around the universities is that SACED was a community education project and an NGO, and it did literacy, union work, labor work, historical work. It was working in decolonization before the word was used. And so it was never a university. We've just had to find a legitimate place in order to be able to get money from the Ford Foundation or anybody else in which to locate yourself, because the point is to continue it. Okay, you know, I was saying to someone, the next Neville Alexander Conference is going to have a wheelchair ramp and a loo right next to the door. Okay, you can't have it up to floors. Thank goodness there's a lift. So I think you got, and continuation is what we're talking about. Archives are what you're talking about. SACED from 1959 right through to now. There were many shifts. Okay, because in the beginning, the political shifts was to almost support out-of-school matrics and work within the system. But I think I'm looking at Ashley over there. Would you like to take over this point? Okay. And Enver could also. No, there were responses. I mean, I think that there was interaction. I mean, with the rise of the trade unions, okay, in the middle of the 1980s, which were absolutely 70s, okay, but unexpected. Then LACOM came in because the LACOM needed, I mean, the unions needed certain work done, and they approached SACED and asked for that work to be done, and that's how LACOM was born. The same thing happened with Upbeat. The reason why Upbeat happened was because of 1976 and the kids that needed to continue reading and working and things like that. And it was response to 1986 and also an alternative response to the knowledge that was being produced in the school system at the time. ASERCA was more of an attempt to become part of the system, the new system, under the new dispensation after apartheid. But, and that's why ASERCA came into ground. It was supposed to, we were aiming it at the all adults sitting in the community learning centers, in the colleges and things like that. But unfortunately, the 9-point plan happened under Kader Ashmal. And whilst literacy was mentioned, adult education was not. And adult education is much more than literacy. So we lost all our funding in a sense because everybody went to the sectors. The other one that lost out completely was early childhood development. Those two sectors were not in the 9-point plan, which was a disaster. And so that those all influenced SACED and its shifts and things like that. And then, because it started off to support black students that were kicked out of universities because of the University Extension Act. It's like in human resources, yeah. So that was one of the major problems, and then moved into to second chance matrics or second chance adults with Turret College. I think People's College was a much more wider, broader political education attempt at things, as would be the stuff in the New Nation. Yeah, so there was a lot of different things, and those things, I think we haven't begun to analyze SACED yet. All we're doing is collecting at the moment, and the people who are being interviewed are doing the analyzing. So they will tell you what they think. Like Lindy will tell you what she thinks and what happened when she was there. Carone will do the same thing. Ashley will do the same thing. So you will find, as you said, if you'll have to read, but you'll find it'll thread itself in throughout the website. I mean, they really have gone through this website very quickly because there is such a wealth of material. And we will be, as I say, deepening it and deepening it and deepening it. So thank you as far as that's concerned. Yep.
You want to say anything?
Hi everyone. Regarding New Nation, so in the Mabuye collection or archive, there's a bunch of New Nation copies of New Nation, and the index will be available on the website to sort of peruse for the articles and things like that. Just wanted to say that.
Yeah, learning. Yeah. Lawrence, you want to say anything? Okay, great. So thanks very much. I think that what has been presented here is really the beginning. It is the result of a year of very intense work, and our students have done wonderfully. I just want to end off with this point. The focus of the discussion on the archives here and the previous session has been on education. But I tried to convey another idea at the beginning, and that is that the creation of the SACED archive must also be seen as part of a process of creating archives of left politics. Many people who are around here who have been involved in different movements from the 1950s, your archives are all over the place. They're scattered, fragmented, they're being lost. And it's really critically important that we make a concerted effort to archive left movements in South Africa, the continent, and elsewhere. They simply don't exist. So when we have a question about the kind of education in movements that use the New Nation, the Learning Nation, the archives of those movements are nowhere to be found. And our generation does a disservice to the ongoing struggles by not making an effort to archive those movements. So the SACED project is also a part of that. And there are people in the room who are thinking and doing this work. But I'm hoping, Salim and Leanne, that when we have subsequent Neville Alexander conferences, that we can report on the creation of left archives, liberation archives in South Africa and across the continent. But I'm now handing over to Leanne. Oh, you've got your own mic. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much. Another round of applause. Most exciting. Okay.
Unfortunately, Naledi is about to leave. She has to go, other arrangements, but do you want to wish?
Salim is putting me on the spot. I am proud of all of you that you keep the work, keep annoying us. We need that. It's important to get government not to be comfortable. We must begin to disrupt the orderliness of disorder. I am proud to see so many young people because we've borrowed the future from you. And if I see in the room, I'm very emotional about the young people on a Saturday when there are so many clubs open, that you decide to come here. With you, our future and your future of your kids is safe with you. It is very nice and lovely to see colleagues Crane and everyone in this room who has always been part of the work that Neville has been doing. There should be many more Nevilles. And in celebration of his life, I really want to say to all of you guys, particularly to his family, because Neville gave of himself freely. Thank you very much for this opportunity. We need the work that you are doing. It is important to get our work because we are really at very basic levels. But I know that there are men and women out there who are busy making sure that we do well. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks so much. Comrade Naledi is traveling safely. You'd notice that we were meant to have our austerity in education panel now. I think the dialectic between the young and the old in the room means that time is just a whole other thing. I'm trying to hold us to something, but it's not working. So can I suggest, tea is just outside. So we're going to break for 15 minutes. Our comrades, chaired by Comrade Farrell, are going to do their panel in an hour. So if you can please respectfully be back by 12:30, you have 15 minutes. Tea is out there. Please don't come back in with an open cup. I can't say it to another person or I might leave. Bring a closed bottles in, but we really don't want open things because it's going to ruin the floors and so on. So please have a lovely cup of tea. We'll start at 12:30 with austerity in education. And just to say, we've had about 40 people online, so we have to try to keep to the schedule because they're also watching from all over. Thank you. Eight papers. Okay.
I think the mics.
Comrades, hello, comrades, can we please settle down into the seats? We're expecting more people to come in. I know there was a delay with cups and so forth for tea, and tea is very important. Actually, coffee is more important, but that's my opinion. Is it tea? Sorry, okay. There's a debate. Shall we have a panel on whether tea or coffee is more important? All right, so yeah, some more people might join us. We've gone back online, so we now all need to behave ourselves, or not. We're going to start the session, austerity in education. And given what austerity represents, not only in this country, but in wherever capitalist economies exist, I think it's a perpetual condition. And working in the education sector, we each have our experiences. We don't have higher education on this panel, but maybe that's okay because we had higher education people on a number of other panels and people make inputs from the context and departments they work in. But we have two comrades here with me. I'll introduce in a moment. I'm Farrell. Oh, actually, we put that up there already, so you probably recognize. I'm Farrell Hunter. I've worked in adult education for more than 2 decades, so it gives you an idea of how old I am, and particularly in community adult education, non-formal popular education, with other comrades who are in the room, and I'm sure they'll make contributions later as well. We asked 1 or 2 of them to be on the panel, but I think they prefer to engage from where they are. But we have, I mean, many people will know about the recent crisis. There's always a crisis in education, isn't there? I mean, when you listen to the inputs on SACED or you listen to the panels earlier today on whether it's language, there are always challenges that we are facing. And the question often is, how do we respond? But the 2 comrades with me here, Abida and Gululi, work in different contexts within education. Abida is going to be up first and speak to us about the struggle she's been part of with others who are here as well today around what we are probably all aware of, the cuts, or is it the non-renewal, however you want to shape it. It comes down to the same thing, that 2,407 teachers' jobs will not be renewed. And of course, that's a travesty. And it's an indictment on the failure of the state. Abida will talk to us about that. And Kululi Vava is a comrade of mine in adult education going back many years. And he'll talk about what I always describe as the perpetual condition of austerity in adult education. But more about that when Vava speaks, and I'll perhaps add my 2 cents worth, given it's the sector we both work in afterwards. So Abida, will you please ask to prefer to be up there? You have a presentation slide, don't you? Are we being assisted with the slide presentation? So Abida is going to talk to the work that she's been doing with others in the education system. Just while that's being set up, I think people may know that this is not also peculiar to the Western Cape. Threats on teachers' jobs have also happened in other provinces. And this is secondhand, so correct me if you want when we have conversation later on. I think what has happened in some of the other provinces is that there's been as often happened, a moving of the pieces on the chessboard. So basically it means that where the jobs could be saved, cuts happened elsewhere, whether in infrastructure or in other areas, which doesn't mean that it's necessarily good and that it saves us. It just means that the condition becomes equally bad in different ways. But let Abida tell us more about the West. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon again. Thank you for the organizers for inviting me. I must say that I'm really, really nervous. I don't normally do this. I normally sit on the other side. But I do believe that, it keeps me young to be out of my comfort zone. So I'm asking for your patience and your indulgence. So my input is very short. And I think most of us know about, austerity and austerity in education. But I think it's important to discuss what is currently happening, not just only in the Western Cape, but the Western Cape is taking a particular way of what is happening. So I wanted to just talk very briefly about the Western Cape Education Crisis Committee. We heard about 2-3 months ago, we saw a number of newspaper articles and press releases and statements saying that the Western Cape Department of Education is planning to cut 2,407 jobs. And and with a few comrades, we were actually in another meeting talking about energy embargo stuff. And the issue came up and we said, but nobody is doing anything about it. You don't hear outcry from the trade unions. It seems that we are just accepting this. There's no opposition to this and that. And that is how we then decided to call just a meeting of people who is opposed to these cuts and who are concerned of what is happening in education. And that is actually how we started. We were quite surprised, I must say, at the response from communities and people, showing an interest and a concern. So for us, very quickly, once we had announced, that we're going to have this general meeting, and then, the next thing is a WhatsApp group. I think within the space of 3 hours, we had more than 1,000 members in that WhatsApp group. So that shows you how serious this matter is being taken. One of the challenges, though, is that the majority of those people who joined the WhatsApp group were teachers, and they were, of course, concerned about, their jobs and job security. But for us, why we thought that we should form this crisis committee was more for a space for community people to organize and mobilize to oppose and resist these budget cuts, because we felt in terms of the impact it will have on this community. So very quickly, we organized, general meetings in different communities, and we were outside at the WCD. We had protests there. We even organized protests in different communities, not just here in the central or in the urban metropole, but as far as Houston and, Ceres and Atlantis, because so this is really a big problem for us. And so during this when we started this campaign, so I know earlier in the previous input also, Louise was talking about not having enough funding. We've basically been running this campaign out of our pocket and the generosity of strangers and individuals who send us money occasionally. So that is how we have been mobilizing. And I think we've lost some of the momentum because I think it's that kind of the year. But also people are tired also of struggling, especially if you think, there is going to be no solution and it looks like, the cuts is going to happen any rate. So there is that we are fighting again. So most of us in the organizing group, we are young people. Most of them are at university. I don't think we have any teacher actually in the organizing. Yes, we have 2 teachers now who joined us later. So that is really the composition of the group. And that is what has been driving us really. It's the concern of what is happening in education. And the way we've been trying to organize this campaign is really to make sure that the voice of the communities are heard, to make sure that the voice of students are heard, because we also believe that trade unions have an important role to play. And we know the unions, unfortunately, to date, they have been very disappointing in terms of the role that they've played here in the Western Cape with regards to the the crisis that we are confronted with. So, initially they said to us, for example, they can't join us on the picket line and they can't join us on the protest because they've got a dispute that they've deferred against the Department of Education. And so they created a lot of impression that dispute is actually because of this planned cut of these 2,400 posts, but it's not really that. Their dispute was it's a previous thing of teachers who's working for more than 3 months, that they must become permanent teachers. So it's that kind of dispute. It's somehow related to this planned cuts, but it's not the same. So that actually caused us a little of a disadvantage, because once they announced that, that they've won this thing now, it was already something that was declared a few years ago. So it was basically just confirming that. It really set us back in the sense that now people think that, that there's no longer that crisis. But what they have confirmed, what the WCD has confirmed, that they don't call it teacher cuts. They also don't call it retrenchments. All that they are saying, so it's really about language. They're saying we are not renewing the contracts of 2,407 teachers. So if you do the math, that really means that close to 100,000 learners are going to be affected. So that is really what we are about and what we are still trying to do. So at the moment, what we're doing, we're looking at all the circulars from the Department of Education, trying, because it's the way it is explained. I mean, like, you have to read that circulars 4 or 5 times to get a sense of what it is that they're actually meaning, so that we need to empower communities. So we know it's like end of the year, but we know there's going to be a problem January 2025. So we are continuing with our work. It's not easy work. I think it can be sometimes very demoralizing and demotivating, but it's important work. And the fact that most of the people in the coordinating committee are young people, or some younger than others, I think that is an encouragement for us. And it's important, because also we feel very strongly that that another world is possible, and it is important, and that is what is needed, especially when it comes to education. So, I mean, some of the things that we've done, because we understand also, I think what Dr. Naledi said earlier about language is important. So we've tried also to, with our minimal resources, so the issue about language, I think we need to be intentional about that, because we have produced a very basic pamphlet, and we made sure that it was translated in 3 languages. I mean, some people said, the Afrikaans and the Xhosa was maybe a bit too deep, but at least there's been an attempt, and we are aware of the power of language and how we communicate with communities. And so it's not just, and we also believe that our work is not just on a WhatsApp group, but it's really going into communities and having meetings in different communities. So what we're planning now, between now and January 2025, is to go to communities, even rural communities. So we're still trying to source funding, because everything costs money. But that is the plan, because we feel that if we have these information sessions and we empower the communities, there's going to be more. I mean, the campaign will then gain that momentum again if the communities understand and appreciate what it means for these 2,407 cuts. And I think some of the things that has also been crucial was that, that there's been recognition given in terms of the work that we've done. So we've interacted with the trade union movement. We have joined the anti-austerity forum, because we also believe that, this is not just austerity in education. Austerity affects us everywhere, in health, in all the different departments, and it disproportionately affects poor and working class communities. So, I mean, I was thinking about, what was one of the striking things that we found is how the WCED is communicating. So I tried to make a short timeline, and between the 27th of August and to date, there's been a number of press statements from the WCED. The first one was the circular that they sent to the principals, the school managers, to say, we're not renewing these positions. And then on the 28th of August, the MEC for Education, David Mania, released another statement saying that, we should be, we must work with them. In fact, that call was more for trade unions, because that was the time when the unions had declared the dispute and they threatened with strike action. But for us, what was striking about that is that we were outside at the WCD protesting there in mornings, early mornings, between 7 and 9 o'clock. They never acknowledged our presence. They didn't invite us in. They never made an attempt to talk to us. And when we, for example, asked them, have you got the numbers? Who are the schools that are affected? How does this affect working class communities? What does it mean for STEM subjects? What does it mean? Because well-resourced schools or ex-Model C schools, they can absorb the cost. They can pay for the teacher's salary, but a no-fee school, that is not going to happen. And what is striking between all these communications, even the National Minister of Education, Siviwe Kwarube, when she made a statement that, she's making appeals to the Minister of Finance, Kodongwana, in terms of reallocating budget. That, and then there was a very callous comment, I think it was the spokesperson of education, who said, excess teachers can go overseas and provide their services there. Yeah, that is to the extent what he said, notwithstanding and appreciating that we've already got, I think, more than 30,000 teachers that we need in the current system with the current ratios that is not ideal in any case. I mean, we're not even talking about special needs. We're not even talking about subjects that they don't see as important, such as arts and culture and music. Our children don't, if you're in a poor school, if you're poor, if you're black, you're not going to get those subjects. That is the reality that we are subjected to today. So in all these interactions in the media and that kind of thing, the WCED has never invited communities. They've never invited us to say, what does it mean? Or they've never invited us to explain to us what it's going to mean. All that they've been consistently saying is that we are not retrenching teachers. But the flip side of that coin is that they are not going to renew the contracts of that 2,407 teachers. Already in the Western Cape, we do have a shortage of teachers. I mean, during our engagements, especially with teachers are stressed out. They are concerned about, the large class sizes and the excess burden already. So you have a lot of teachers leaving the teaching profession. And we're also not making it attractive to young people and new people to come in and join that profession. So, so some of the key words and the buzzwords we were confronted with a lot in terms of the statements from the WCED, from the Western Cape government, but also National Treasury was fiscal stability. I mean, that is what they are interested. They are not interested in educating our children. So I found it very interesting. And I really appreciated Dr. Naledi's input. But I would have liked to have asked her that, how is that going to be possible when we are confronted with these budget cuts? We are not going to be able to do that project with regards to mother tongue and if we have budget cuts. Already we are sitting with class sizes of more than 50 sometimes in a class. I mean, teachers are reaching out to us in the foundation phase and says, I've got 60 learners in my class. I can't teach. So I don't know where the money is. I mean, it's not about the money, it's the political will. Because what we've also heard consistently is that WCED and the DA government is playing politics, because they are saying the public sector wage bill is too high. This is the same WCED and the same Western Cape government and the same DA government who applauded Godongwana when he delivered his budget speech in February, where austerity has been part of our program for more than 10 years. So this is nothing new. In fact, the DA government wants less public servants. They want less civil servants. They put all the blame for all the challenges that we have in finances, in education, at the feet of our public servants. And we know that is not the case. So we've also had to become familiar with all these terminologies that they use. They talk about post-establishment and, all these kind of things. But so when we assess the communications that they've sent, for example, to the school managers, it's really, they are not helping them, and principals, their hands are really tied. So what most principals do are they are just implementing what they said without any challenge. For example, we've heard that there's a budget shortfall of 3.8 billion. But we also know that the Western Cape government has reallocated 8 billion over 3 years to spend on other things, not education. So once budget is allocated from National Treasury, the province then has got the discretion to allocate. So they are not being forced to allocate to allocate the money to education. In fact, they are diverting money from education. We know that, I think for the last 3 years or so, this Western Cape government has been taking away 1 billion from education and 1 billion from health for the LEAP project. I mean, it's a very controversial project. It talks about safety and security, and we all want safe and secure communities. But we've not had the benefit of that 1 billion that has been diverted, especially if you go from the working class communities. That is not happening. Also, the national guidelines, for example, says the learner to teacher ratio should be 1 to 30. But we know in most cases is way over that. I mean, like, we are now going to be confronted already with a ratio that is more, in some instances, 1 to 50. The other reality is with these planned budget cuts that if we are struggling to access the information to know how many teachers at specific schools, but we do know, for example, that in one school in Mitchell's Plain, that 10 teachers have to be cut. 10 teachers at one school. It also means the potential that some of the rural schools will have to close because there aren't enough teachers. So that is really what we are confronted with. But also then, if you think about in our communities, that important subjects, not that all subjects are not important, but subjects especially related to STEM, math and science and biology, because they don't have that specialist teachers and the class sizes are too small, they are now being instructed that if they are not complying with the ratio, they can't offer that subject, which then means that a school might not be able to offer math. A school might not be able to offer physics. And in some instances, schools are already not offering that subjects for a number of reasons. Some of that reasons is really because if I only have 4 learners in my classes doing math and 3 of them fail, I have a more than 80% failure rate. So there are all those things, but there's no support mechanisms, especially in poor working class community schools and in the rural areas. The 2022 data says that the Western Cape Education Department has got 1.2 million learners. They've got 8 districts, and they've got, so in that, it's covering the whole of the Western Cape. Also the Western Cape government, they allocate 37% of their budget to education, while the national average is 42% almost. And also the same thing, the provincial budget in terms of what they allocate for staff compensation to the national average. So they also allocate less than that. In fact, in some of the discussions where other provinces are looking at alternatives in terms of teacher cutting, in paying suppliers later, and maybe not doing infrastructure, painting of schools and building new classes, the Western Cape has refused to change or to amend their ratios and their allocations. In fact, when the teacher unions made representations for alternatives to the teacher cuts, they rejected all those alternatives. They've not considered every one of these things. They are still saying that this is the way that we need to go. Yet the same MEC in March said that, in fact, he's going to employ more teachers, and 6 months later we hear that, that they don't have enough money. In fact, the Minister of Finance has actually said that the Western Cape is creating this problem for themselves. But we also do know that National Treasury is not blameless in this whole thing. It's really about the spending priorities that we have at the national and a provincial level. We know that over the years that budget, especially for education and health, has been cut significantly and continuously and all this kind of thing. So this is an ongoing problem. We know that at the beginning of the year, we are going to have a crisis. But one of the big challenges that we have is that communities are do not feel, I think, confident enough in terms of saying that we need to stop that. So that is why the work that we're doing and that we are planning to do is so important. And I wanted to just illustrate how they communicate. So this is one of their circulars. They say that they send to all the schools. Educator establishments for ordinary and public special schools. This circular was not published on the WCD portal until well after this date. So, also when they share information and they say, if you click here, that you can get further information, that is never the case. You always struggle to get the information. So also school management, especially the principals, they struggle even to interpret and to understand. So there's a lot of miscommunication. But one of the other things that the WCD does extremely well is intimidation and fear. So principals, for example, cannot speak to the media unless they've got prior approval from the WCD, which is a big challenge, which means, and I think the fear that's hanging over most school managers' head, they use the example of Wesley Newman, who was dismissed a few years ago. So those are the things that we are struggling with and struggling against. So we know that we need to have the teachers on our side, but their fear in terms of their job security is so great because that is how the WCD is managing schools at the moment. It's really by fear and intimidation. And I know earlier we talked about, the role and the powerful roles that school governing bodies can potentially have. But the reality really is in our schools that school governing bodies are in most cases are rubber stamping what the principal says. So it's not independent, strong school governing bodies in what the legislation intends to happen. So that is some of the things that we really need to work against and fight against, and to empower communities and to work with communities and school governing bodies. So what does this mean for us? Almost 100,000 learners will be affected. Guaranteed increase in dropout rates, limited subject choices, because they won't have teachers to teach specialist subjects, lack of opportunities for young people and access to universities. At risk youth, more of those youth will fall through the cracks. And that means also an increase in crime, because young people then stand in corners, and that is how one of the ways that they get recruited into gangs, because these children are simply not going to be accommodated at schools. I mean, some teachers told us they don't understand, they're going to cut teachers at our school, but they built new classrooms. There will be no teachers to be able to teach in that classrooms. Yeah. So also, I mean, for new teachers, it's a bleak future for new teachers who are newly qualified, and for young people who's doing education, because it also means that they're entering a system where that cannot accommodate them. I wanted to just look at one of the communities. So Manenberg, I grew up in Manenberg. Manenberg is a working class community like many other working class communities. It was established in 1966. I think there's close to 70,000 or so residents there. They now have 2 high schools. They used to have 3, but they closed one already a couple of years ago. And they have close to 10 primary schools. So, I mean, I called the school Manenberg High. They only have 116 matriculants. They don't offer physics anymore. They offer pure maths, but it's a small group. They're not sure whether they'll be able to offer pure math again next year. So that also means, I mean, if you look at Manenberg, a few years ago when we were working with the schools in that area, so if at grade 8 they start with maybe 1,000 learners, by the time they get to matric they have 120 learners. That is, so what happens? That is in addition to that 57,000 learners who falls out in grade 4. So by the time they get to matric, Manenberg will not produce any scientists. No biochemists, no engineers, because they are not offering physical science at the schools. So that is what it means really for our communities, what it means if we are going to have these teacher cuts. In fact, we are having the teacher cuts. I just wanted to this is a very short video. It just talks about what it also means in terms of for a rural school. So if you can just be patient.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, like the Honourable Vin Vogel, I rise on behalf of 378 children from the Ceres area between the ages of 7 and 13 years old, who recently received letters informing them that they no longer qualified for learner transport. For children living in the Vredebes area, a community primarily consisting of RDP housing, what this means is having to walk 9.6 kilometers to get to school and back each day. They don't just walk, they risk their life and limb navigating ganglands and crossing highways because their homes fall 200 meters short of the 5-kilometer distance required to qualify for learner transport. The National Learner Transport Policy excludes children living within 5 kilometers of schools, but there's very little that worried Vredebes parents can do about it. Schools which are closer to home are already overcrowded, and paying up to 490 Rand a month for private transport is unaffordable, so their children must take their chances on the road. To compound the injustice, as they walk, the children are passed by buses with empty seats that instead of affording them safety, will drive right past them. Cancelling their bus rides perpetuates inequality, creating barriers to education for working class families and compromising the safety of young learners. It seems obvious that children shouldn't be forced to undertake hazardous journeys to get to and from school when there's a ready solution, unoccupied seats on buses within easy reach. But this is obvious this is not obvious enough for civil servants. So we call on the provincial government to urgently reevaluate these bus routes and the withdrawal of services from these children. The rule about having to live at least 5 kilometers from school to qualify for free transport is arbitrary and too rigidly applied. Let common sense and leadership prevail. Education policies must prioritize safety, dignity, and the right to education of all children, and none should be left behind. Thank you so much.
So that is a community in the rural community of Witzenberg in Ceres. So we know more of that is going to come and more of that is going to happen. It's already starting to happen. So, I mean, we've talked a lot about so it's more than 2,400 posts, but also the livelihoods of about 24,000 people is affected. If you use the multiplier of 10 people, I mean, even the person who's selling the sweets outside of the school, the person who's running the hairdresser. So there are more people affected. It's not just the teachers, it's not just the learners, but it's also our whole community that is being affected. And whether I have children at school or not, I don't at the moment. I think it affects all of us in different ways, but it also affects us as a society. I mean, we are the most unequal society in the world. We've got an unemployment rate of 32%. If you look at young people, that unemployment rate pushes up to 45% plus. So, I mean, if you look at, and it's predominantly Black, and it's a predominantly young. So there's something is going to happen because something has got to give. So if we don't do anything, if we just sit back and accept this, something is going to happen and then it's going to be too late. I mean, I just wanted to say that we need to consider this. This is what Verwoerd said about Black African people. Hewers of wood and drawers of water. We cannot simply allow this to happen. So I think it's incumbent on all of us to join, to do, whether it's in our advocacy or whether it's in academic spaces, that we need to mobilize the community so that we can actually oppose these cuts and future cuts, because they're not going to stop with the 2,400. This is just the beginning. And for us now, really, it is the time to say enough and that we need to do something about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Abida. I'm sure we all found that extremely informative, and the work being done by Abida and other activists around this really, really crucial issue and what it, as she pointed out, means for society. I checked with Leanne, who was coordinating the day mostly, that we will be allowed another 15 minutes beyond the scheduled time on the program. And during that time, we will be engaging on discussion and comments, and I'm sure that many of you would have lots to say about this. But first, we're going to ask Mkhululi Vava to address us as well. Noting as well that many of the students or young people who don't, youth especially, given that we refer to our sector, I say ours, because that's how Mkhululi and I are connected as well. In the youth and adult education sector, it's just called adult education. The truth is that more youth are actually in the sector, exactly for the reasons that Abida has pointed out. And I'll say perhaps something towards the end about it, but Mkhululi, please go ahead. Thanks.
I'm saying greetings to you all. I don't know. I think I'm not the one to stand in front of people, more especially a big crowd. I'm having shivers down my spine as I speak. Be that as it may, we will continue with whatever we're mandated to do. As Farrell was saying, we are in the adult education sector. It has gone some sort of metamorphosis through policy directions. Initially, you were talking of night schools. Then it became adult basic education and training. At some point, it became adult education and training. Currently, we're talking of community education and training. which perhaps now I think it's high time that it really finds expression in the communities and in the system itself as to what does it really mean when you say community education and training. Also, apartheid adult education system provided us with the opportunity for second chance education. So in that process, billions of rands were plowed in the concept itself to say this is what should be happening. Glossy as it is on paper, implementation. Am I? I think it's okay now.
Let me just check.
As I was saying, as much as this was glossy, looking very good in terms of paper, but we find ourselves in the same scenario where implementation is always lacking or non-existent per se, you see. So adult education continues, therefore, to get the least kind of support. Now it should have been getting something. While this sector has to cater for, initially it was to cater for adults, but now you find many young people coming through, either have fallen on the cracks or whatever, but there are more young people now than the adults as it was envisaged initially, because it was adult education. But adults, I don't know whether they are phased out or whatever, but it's the youth now that are more coming in. The unfortunate part again about the sector is that it receives less than 2% of the budget. We're talking community education, and in communities, it should have been something that you say, how are our communities? What is it that they need, and all that. But I don't think there is enough research that is done, basically to budget for the sector. But they only use measurements from what you say is GET attainment or GT enrollments and FET enrollments, of which our communities don't need that per se. They need more than that, you see. As a result, you know, we were lucky enough at some point in time, I think it was 2007, 2008, where the likes of Ivo Bachis, Farrell Hunter, and others were part of a ministerial committee under our Minister Naledi Pandor. They pushed for proposals that were more aligned to adult education that is responsive, that is more relevant to our communities. As they did that, because it was just a green paper then, you know, in 2007, at least there was something that was said. There was something that was there that was said to say we can push this agenda with the there were policy shifts that were the policy proposal shifts that were brought forward and recommendations to that, and those found expression in the white paper in 2017. Thanks to them again to say those found expression in the white paper to say at least now you will find your popular education being part of your college system to a level where, you know, currently there is a resolution that has been taken that whilst initially you'll get 90% academic in terms of what you get from the learning centers, if I may say, Now they have moved to say 30% must be academic, 40% must be occupational, and 30% must be non-formal. The question becomes again, do you have budget to execute all of this? And the jury is out, because at the end of the day, whatever impedes progress in this sector, it's the less budget that it gets. It's an inadequate budget, and it can't fix the problems that the communities have. This low funding, I don't know how do we deal with it, but there must be something that is done to say, if ever as communities we want this community education to really be a vehicle that can take us away from the situation that we're in and push us to where we should be, we need to stand up and say, this is enough. We can't go on with these kind of arrangements. Even the additional kind of support that you get, like funds that you can get from National Skills Fund, you will find out that instead of them going where they should be going, they end up topping either on the compensation of employees. 80% plus of that money goes to compensation of employees instead of servicing the communities that is meant to serve in terms of skilling and making our communities viable. This, therefore, seeks to say the work that the likes of Ivo Bachis, Farrell, and others is getting little meaning, if ever it was proposed in 2007. It found itself in the policy in 2017, and today is not implemented. It means that it found little meaning. I don't know whether the bureaucrats really listen, but at some point, us here, the communities out there, need to make them listen to us, because I believe that they are there to service what we need, not their needs. And if ever we can make our voice heard, they will know what we need. As always, you know, this issue of implementation is a thorny issue. Once you get to a point where everything is done, but the person now who should be implementing, the person who has the purse, doesn't allocate the needed funds, whatever, the whole thing that we're doing becomes null and void. It's even exacerbated by the horrible conditions of service for the educators in the sector. You know, their status of employment, you know, there are different modes that they are paid. As a result, you'll find out that day in and day out, individually or as a collective, the educators in the sector and the Department of Higher Education and Training are taking the government to court. Either they are not remunerated adequately, or they are not paid their monies for the services they have rendered, or their hours are less than the others' hours. There is a lot that is happening, but day in and day out, there are court cases. Through those pressures on courts and the forums, like there are forums of educators that have emerged. Because after 2015, when there was this migration, now you'll find out that educators in the sector were treated as vulnerable people. The sector was said to be a vulnerable sector, but it ended up like you would feel that even educators are treated as vulnerable people. But after 2015, the interest from bigger unions, if I may say, became very, very strong, such that it fragmented people in the sector. But be that as it may, they stood up and And they're still standing up and saying that you are not here for us, we are here for our subscriptions. We fought our battles and want to continue to fight our battles on our own. And what they are saying is simple. For what we do, we want just equal pay. If ever we're equal pay for the equal work that we do in the same category. Nothing else, just give us a minimum of 7 hours a day, 5 days a week, and we'll be comfortable with that because this is not something that is temporal. This is something that is going to be there for donkey's years. CLCs are unable to implement, that is your community learning center, are unable to implement what they should be implementing as the mandate. Because one, they are not resourced. The infrastructure is not there. They depend either on schools or halls or whatever, you know. So whatever they do, there is no proper resourcing, proper funding, and proper. So they fend for themselves, the educators out there, besides the horrible conditions of service that they are suffering. But they make sure that they sustain the system. Once again, in that process, there is DVV International, which Farrell is also working with and assisting us, that picks up the crumbs, train the educators on popular education, non-formal education, and all that. And I don't think it's their function per se. They are assisting. It's the function of the Department of Higher Education and Training, or is the function of government. But I think the government has abdicated that function. And them being in that space, it's helping them a lot. And they are relaxing because there are these people who are carrying the burden on our behalf. And we can sit and lie to ourselves, but if ever the government is not supporting community learning centers, that is a disservice to our communities. It's a total disservice because whoever is going to be in the sector, if ever you don't have the support, you're not going to render your services well. We are aware that e-education is not a panacea to all the socio-economic challenges that we have. Be that as it may, if ever, as espoused in the policy, there can be adequate funding, adequate budgets and everything, it can significantly improve the lives of the people in our communities. Hence, I'm saying, I'm making a clarion call here that it can be for individuals and everything. All of us here in the communities out there, they should be like saying, it's enough. Let's make these community learning centers at our spaces work. And they are not working for us. They are working for the greater good of our people. As indicated initially, currently, if you want anything that will talk to the training of educators or capacitating of educators in the sector, you rely on DVV International, with the NGOs that they are partnering with, you'll have to rely on a popular education program. You'd have to rely on e-women's cycle. We have to rely on adult learning forum. You have to rely on radical educators that are there just to assist the adult educators, meaning that the government itself has minimal assistance towards the educators. As the government does not prioritize community education, the youth and adults are the ones who faces the brunt because they are not supported, you see. So if ever they are not supported, what do we do? I'm talking about millions that are outside the schooling system that need help. Even this year, after these examinations, there will be many students who would fall on the cracks. And when they look around, the CLCs will be their home. What is it that we're saying? We're saying, Aluta continua, let's fight. Amandla.
Thanks, Mkhululi. I'm looking over at Louise. Louise sits on the the Eastern Cape College Council, where there's community learning centers. In each province, there's one community college council. And next week, I'll be part of a session in East London where Louise and others will be engaging around these very issues. And yeah, Mkhululi, you're correct. You sketched the picture as it is. It's a sector of education that's failed by the department. There are others in the room here, the comrades who work with us, Derek Naidu, Enver Motala, Salim, a whole range of people who, as Mkhululi says, have been trying to support community educators. Mkhululi heads the Educator Forum in the Eastern Cape, which is the largest, and Mara, I mustn't forget, is at the back of the room there. She's the Adult Learning Forum chairperson, Mkhululi referred to as well. So NGOs and organizations, others are trying to assist. We have an arrangement, some kind of memorandum of understanding with the Department of Education to try and improve the sector. But as was pointed out, policies have come and policies have gone and policies have shifted, and it's really that chess piece again, scenario. And the budgets don't follow the story of our existence in this country. It seems we're great on policy and it's wonderful documents, and it doesn't translate into reality, change people's lives. Just recently, there was a ministerial task team set up. Yes, yet another one. We're also good at that, don't we? Many commissions and task teams, we've done yet another one, and presented to us, some of us sat in a presentation on some of the findings of that task team. And, in part, the report was scathing as well, as far as the failure of what these community colleges and community learning centers represent. It represents in some ways the economic makeup of this country. It's a wholly unequal system. At the top of the system, you have people who earn huge amounts of money, and educators are operating what feels like piecemeal arrangements. It was a mess until Educator 4 and others stepped in. And again, you're right, Mkhululi, the teacher unions have failed adult educators. I used to joke and say they're not a money spinner for the unions. They're too insignificant. Their membership fees don't amount to much, perhaps. I kind of think what other reason it would be for a teacher union not to support educators in the sector. They just can't be seen as viable. In fact, Abida, I was thinking about it again. It's something like I think you said 40-something% of youth drop out. I think the figures tell us it's closer to 60% of youth in the country that are not in, it's a terrible acronym, not in education, employment, and training. It kind of almost sounds like it puts the responsibility on the youth. 60% of them. And yes, some of them do come to the community learning centers. And for the last 2 years with the Women's Circle, one of the NGOs we work with, I got out of my bureaucratic space and would travel down to Worcester and Touwsrivier with Vanessa Reynolds. And I spent time with youth in that area, in those two areas. And it's shocking what youth are going through in areas like Touwsrivier that are towns that have all but been forgotten by the state. It was a really interesting Daily Maverick article about a year and a half ago. It was really telling. It wasn't a perfect article, but it was really telling about us. During COVID, of course, it made things much, much worse. So the point is, what role for community in adult education, youth education, and what direction does it head in? And the last thing to say is that our youth are being sold a dummy by what we hear officials say. And what officials say is, get skills. And it's long been proven that skills in itself is not the problem, or the lack thereof is not the problem. The problem is jobs. And so we've got to be honest about this. Someone spoke about honesty earlier on. We've got to be honest about this, and we've got to support them. In this country has a record of people being self-reliant. Selby, Northern Cape, others will tell us great stories over time. self-reliant, setting up cooperatives, finding other ways, but that's not what our youth are pointed to when an economy fails them, as it does adults as well. So, okay, I stop there. That's my little addition. There's much more one could say. I've been in the sector for way too long, I think, at times. So let's go into a few minutes of questions, comments, and before lunch. Yes, Leanne, you want to say anything? No. Okay, let's take some hands. We'll take 3 or 4, and then, yeah, I see 1, 2, Neville, 3, Salim, 4 in front here. Okay, can we take those 4 first? Okay, where's the 5th one? Okay, we'll go to 5, because apparently these are the fingers. All right, you want to go first? You're the microphone at the back there. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. I'm a high school teacher, activist with SACID since the early 80s as well. I'm addressing this to the Crisis Committee, a suggestion. We know that most principals are gatekeepers. There's an opportunity to reach a lot more teachers. Towards the end of this week, the marking of matric exams is taking place in several very large centres in the Western Cape, to which people from all over the province come, including as far as Plettenberg Bay, Springbok, etc. Oh, that's Northern Cape. But anyway, all over the place, teachers come to mark. There are thousands of teachers in each of these centres. If you can arrange some kind of pamphlet, I know it's old school without podcasts, etc., but pamphlets reach people. They can take them home. You can give contact details. You can highlight some of the issues around the cuts, etc. You can reach a lot of teachers by communicating with them, sitting ducks almost in numbers in the marking centres.
Neville, you were next? Yeah. Go.
Yeah. One of the things that we need to understand with austerity is that it cuts across every aspect of the state. And we've seen how in housing where I work in particular, there's been cutbacks, there's been non-delivery. And we face a particular situation in a government building that we reclaimed from the state, that we've occupied, where more than 1,000 people live, and we've created a community there of self-reliance as a way to address the crisis. We have a crisis around housing in our city where over 600,000 people that have been identified on a mystical housing list that needs housing. And so the crisis that we face is not just in education, in health as well. I am a patient at a public health service center, and it's not unusual to wait the whole day for treatment and to be told to come back tomorrow for the medication, of which only half will be available. So the crisis that we face is around the nature of our state and how it sees us as citizens. And so we need to begin to engage much more aggressively with regards to how austerity impacts on our communities and on the functionality of the state. So with regards to what we're trying to do in the housing sector, we are taking on the city of Cape Town, and we want to invite everyone to assist us and to check out our social media website, Reclaim the City, as to how people can become involved in the campaign that we are fighting and taking up the fight with the city of Cape Town with regards to engaging with us, with regards to the delivery of housing per se. But I think what we need to understand is that it's not just in the sectors that we have identified, but the way in which the state sees us as citizens, whether we are academics, unemployed, or artists. It just means that we need to begin to reorganize ourselves and to reassert our citizens' right to be engaged about what should happen to the crises that we face.
Thanks, Bill. Yes. It's multi-sectoral. Okay, Salim, go ahead.
Thanks, Bevel. That's really important. And thanks to all the panel members, Abida, Nkululi, and Farrell. This is an absolutely vital area, and we need to work on this in a national way. And I know, speaking to Abida, this is the intention. I think the Western Cape has a head start, but this austerity in schools is going to affect all provinces, actually. Some of them might not retrench teachers, but they're going to cut school feeding schemes. Now, you know, Comrade Marcus will tell you that most of the children in this country go to bed hungry. And the school meal is the only meal they get quite often. There are many young people who walk great distances. And I know in Gauteng, they're going to, and this is a so-called richer province, they're going to cut school feeding schemes and transport. In other provinces, a combination of the two, as in the Western Cape. I think that it's really important to galvanize, to mobilize communities, as Abida says. I think, and Abida knows this, she's been trying to do this, to get in touch with groups and organizations. I think they've started, made some contact, but we have people and people online from all provinces who are involved in education. And I think that the teacher unions, I'm not sure if it's all of them, but certainly the dominant ones, have been extremely disappointing, as Abida says. They've always been. I mean, remember the huge struggle we had around teacher redeployment, when Neville and many other people involved with teacher unions. I remember Jean Pease, I remember, what's her name? Anyway, Pat van Voore, and many teachers who were involved in unions tried to get the union bureaucracy to take a stand. And it was all framed in the sense of, you know, it was after 1994, soon after 1996, actually, the gear policy. And our analysis said this is part of austerity and it's cuts. And they framed it, including SATU, by the way, framed it as equity. That teachers in areas of access will be transferred to in areas of need. It never ever happened. It was retrenchment by stealth, and it saved the state on its salary bill. What I'm saying is, and you know, there was a lot of work done at that time. We need to build on that. And I think that in terms of teacher unions, I would like to know from Abida, are there any that are a bit more forthcoming? Secondly, what are the chances of a rank and file movement through the communities? Thirdly, those who will be retrenched, normally with labor unions, that becomes the kind of shock force. Those people who are threatened to be retrenched or are retrenched, to go around communities. I mean, the whole idea of PTSAs, because of school governing bodies being completely co-opted, becoming glorified fundraising committees, instead of being the PTSAs that we had in the past, not maybe all school governing bodies. But I also think You know, this is a phenomenon that has happened in many countries. I want to end because we need to go for lunch, sorry, and other people have questions. But in Mexico, there was a teachers' union there, very close to the government, the PRI, for decades, until rank and file teachers, particularly black teachers, indigenous teachers, had to form their own union. Now, I'm not calling for a split or anything. All I'm saying is that, you know, this is a decision teachers must make, obviously, but I'm calling for a grassroots rank and file movement, because we are saddled with a bureaucracy, a conservatism that uses the union movement as a conveyor belt. I also think that Education International, which represents 30 million teachers worldwide, and the president now is the president of SATU. And there are teacher unions there who are progressive, who've been through these struggles. And I think we need to make a noise there as well. I think this is absolutely critical if they get it right now, whether it's the DA or the ANC, actually. They will continue doing the same in other sectors. I think the unions also have a role to play. The final point is, when I mentioned this in the faculty board meeting of our university education, you know, that's where teachers are going to be trained. I mean, what are they training teachers for? They look at me with a blank stare. So I think we have a role, and I've been talking to Noor and others, we have a role to play there as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Salim. Colleagues, we are seriously running out of time. Now we have run out of time. We have one in front and then yourself at the back. You covered? Thanks very much. That's a bit of a help. And then I'm going to ask the panelists to also please keep it a bit brief. We still have a long program this afternoon. Also, it doesn't mean you can't, at the end of the day, make any additional points to help to guide us. Thank you. Go ahead.
Hello everyone, I'm Y, and I'm quite nervous because I don't actually bring about my thoughts to conversations like this, but I decided to say some reflections. And as a student, and recently I came from matric last year of the class of 2023, I actually have been what they could say a product of austerity. And I remember in grade 8 where I didn't have a life science teacher or a natural science teacher at the time. When I was in grade 9, neither. When I was in grade 10, also mathematical literacy. And it actually affects most students because not every teacher reaches out to every student. So when a teacher and a student have this particular bond and they're able to understand and able to learn, and that gets affected and taken away from them, it also makes it harder for everyone to learn. And also to reach back on what Dr. Naledi said about trying to, with multi-language, it's nice to learn about languages and learn it in your own language, but what skills are we learning as students? Because the curriculum hasn't changed, and I have not learned any skills from what I learned in high school. So I really think that now is a time where we really need to change the situation. We need to make sure that what the government says, when they tell us no, we need to make that a yes for us. Because now it's not going to be fair to have a government that's running for us, and then there's nothing that they're running for. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Abida, I want to suggest we must get recent past students' voices to come through as well as students at the moment. Perhaps you're doing that already. I don't want to be arrogant about that. So we're going to, because thanks to the last person has given up the opportunity to speak, can we just try and take 2 minutes each if you want to respond? Thanks.
So I'm going to try to respond to Salim, but I think I need to say I'm going to try to be diplomatic because I'm a trade unionist. So I must be very careful what I say about the teacher unions. Look, I think our biggest problem is that teachers by their nature, they are extremely conservative. But what we've also seen is that the majority teacher union in South Africa is SATU, one of the most conservative affiliates of COSATU. In fact, the affiliate who actually opposed the majority of the other affiliates of COSATU when they were talking about breaking the alliance. So that is what we are dealing with. And part of that problem is also that compounds the problem is that the principals are also SATU members and they are normally in leadership positions. So it makes it very difficult for teachers to organize because of the structure, or the way the school is structured and extremely hierarchical. So if you have a progressive principal and he, for example, says, it's okay, you can go to the protest or you can support the protest and that, then you are safe. But in most cases, teachers don't have that, unfortunately. So there's the element of fear in schools from teachers in job security is so great. But I don't believe that it should just be an issue, and it's linked to what Bevel has said. So we can't fight and oppose austerity just in education or just in health. There needs to be an overall front, or whatever you call it, that is opposing austerity, because it's not limited to health and education. It's in everything that we do, especially the services that needs to be accessed by the poor, because we cannot contract out of that system. So for us, really, the thing is that, yes, we do need universities and tertiary education on board, but especially education departments. But it's not limited to that. It's also health, because wherever we are producing young people and graduates, there is no jobs for a number of reasons, but the big reason is the political and the policy decisions that government is making. And whether it's the DA or the ANC, it's actually two sides of the same coin. So there's no difference. This GNU is just making it, I think, more difficult, because now what is happening, for example, in the education, if you consider Western Cape, the DA is blaming national government is blaming the DA. And we know they are both equally complicit. So that is, unless we are going to work together and fight together, we cannot have the situation where we have a struggle here for health, we have a struggle there for education, we have a struggle there for, for tertiary, for no-fee schools and for and free tertiary education. We need to combine our struggles. That's the only way that we are going to confront this and oppose this and change the system.
Thanks, Abida. I think an important point to end on is that we reject the province versus national debate, and we also are for the unity that Bevel and others have called for. And I think that's what is perhaps a key point that comes out of the session. We've bitten into lunchtime, excuse the pun, but let's go and have some lunch now. And thank you, everyone, for your participation. Thanks, comrades here too. Yeah.
Okay, hi everybody. So lunch, we're running 15 minutes late. Please help me. Lunch is in Studio 2, so you can either take the lift one floor up or walk one floor up. Walk in the direction of town and you'll see it on your right-hand side past the bookstore. We will reconvene and start at 2:30. So you have half an hour. It's not that long, but please try to, please try and be back. Please do not leave anything here. Take your laptops, look after them. And any dirt you have, it would be helpful if you just take it along with you. Thank you.